Asylum seekers are going to be moved out of 50 hotels by the end of January. It's according to the Immigration Minister, who has said that the exits would begin in the coming days, with further hotel contracts coming to an end as the government continues to deliver on its strategy to stop the boats. Well, that's what Robert Jenrick has said. Labour, though, has slammed the number as paltry, while local councils are warning they may still be forced to use the exact same accommodation but take it out of local council budgets instead of the Home Office budget. This comes, though, as it's revealed that a former caravan park owner made £25 million in 2021 alone from a Home Office contract to house asylum seekers in southern England and Wales. Nice work if you can get it. OK, joining me right now is Digital Campaign Manager for the Taxpayers Alliance, Jo Venture. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's great to talk to you. Now, I mean, often we're talking about this with, with experts on migration. Look, we know we've got a load of people here. We've got a load of people still coming, although the numbers seem to be down on last year. So that is something to be encouraged and actually noted. But we've got a huge number of people, tens and tens of thousands of people who are here, either waiting, basically being decided whether they can stay here or not, or they've already been told you have to leave, but there's nowhere to send them. They won't go home to their home country. We can't get rid of them. And basically, we're waiting on the courts to decide if they're allowed to be deported in small numbers to Rwanda. Either way, for the next few years, we're going to have a load of people. Where do we put them is the debate. So when we hear from the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, that they're going to close down 50 hotels that are currently being used and that they're going to start moving those people out, is that going to actually save us, the taxpayers, any money?
It's a very good question, Julia. I mean, we know that the current hotel system isn't working, or certainly isn't working very well. It's costing about £8 million a day. You add that up to a year, you're talking about £3 billion. So something clearly does need to change. But I think there are rightfully going to be concerns that any alternative schemes, such as caravan parks or what we've seen with the Bibi Stockholm, the former cargo ship, are going to end up costing even more or the same. I mean, so I think there does need to be a more sustainable solution in place. Yeah. And I think passing the buck to local councils is concerning, to say the least, frankly.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people are saying, well, this is great news. They're going to close these hotels, and because there is a big impact on local communities, isn't there? Those people, they're not ordering room service. They're not there on a romantic break or on a business break. They're not going and using local restaurants or going to the local theatre. And also, let's be honest, things we're apparently not allowed to say or think. Not many people really want to have, 200 Channel migrants who've turned up to the country without a passport sitting in a hotel at the end of the road, funnily enough. Maybe they're a little bit worried about, their teenage children and the like. I mean, sorry, these are legitimate concerns that people have got, aren't they? But they have to be somewhere. And Bibi Stockholm barge, 400 people. 2 RAF camps. We're looking at, maybe a couple of thousand at best. But we've got tens and tens of thousands. They have to be put somewhere. If they're not going to be put in hotels, there aren't enough caravan parks. And by the way, people would like to go on holiday to those caravan parks. What we're going to do, put them in tents in the middle of, Hyde Park? They're going to have to go somewhere. So if they're not in hotels or B&Bs or in an RAF camp, realistically, they're going to end up in private rental accommodation. And we've already got a shortage of that.
Well, exactly. It feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, if you look back at the announcement of the Rwanda scheme, that actually happened a year and a half ago. And of course, we know where we are with that. It feels like the government's between a rock and a hard place and is stuck in this legal quagmire. I think, realistically, we're looking at a judgment from the Supreme Court, I think, within the next few weeks, which may decide the trajectory. But I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds that have already been dedicated to this scheme, and it's still not in action. All the while, of course, as you've said, the problem is mounting. Those waiting lists are going up to process the migrants, as sort of we're seeing in the NHS. It just feels like there are bigger and bigger mounting problems, which, of course, taxpayers are liable to pay a bigger and bigger bill for.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When we talk about this cost, it is us paying for it. And we talk about the 50 hotels they're going to end those contracts. They're still going to be ongoing for a bit. But there are 400 in total. And we've had these stories. And I always feel for these women, with the bride who's had her wedding booked for 2 years at a hotel. And they say, we've been booked out basically for the whole year. The Home Office is paid, twice our normal rate, which is often the case. They're not even getting a bargain for us on that rate. And your wedding's cancelled. Good luck finding another venue for next June, sort of thing. There is just this massive impact for individuals. But this cost is extraordinary. When you think that, that £3 billion and mounting, what that could be spent on if it was spent on, education, hiring extra teachers, getting, hiring more MRI machines or radiographers and getting, extra shifts for GPs so they could actually see more patients. This money could be so well spent on people already here.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head, Julia. I mean, I think we all know the wider context. We're dealing with a 70-year high tax burden, a cost of living crisis where household budgets are stretched beyond belief. And of course, we have a chancellor saying that there's absolutely no wiggle room to cut people's taxes. But, when you see how that money is spent a lot of the time, it's quite galling. I mean, one of the things that we've seen is, billions of pounds going towards NGOs, towards these global quangos, which actually then work actively against the government's own immigration plans. So you've got this vicious cycle where taxpayers are not only paying for the core problem, but are paying for organisations that are actively trying to stop the solution to that problem.
I think most people are gloriously, pleasantly, I would think, unaware of quite how much of money that charities and lobbying groups get from the government. Again, government doesn't have any money of its own. It's either borrowed and we're paying the interest rate and have to pay it back, or it's our money we've paid in taxes that year. So we are paying for these people to lobby the government on policies, which often are policies that we would support, and they're lobbying to stop them, like on the Rwanda flights and the like. It is bizarre because at the end of the day, it comes out of the pockets of people who are the most worried about these issues, who, I've said it a million times and I keep saying it, who are the people dealing with this issue. We've got pictures going on screen now, people, dumping their stuff out in their rubbish and things outside of hotels. These migrants are not housed, at the end of Downing Street. They're not housed in Keir Starmer's lovely posh street in Islington. Those people who make those decisions, who stand on these platforms, they don't have to deal with the reality day to day.
Absolutely, Julia. Fundamentally, that's correct. And what I would say is if we look at these plans to pass the buck to councils, make councils responsible for housing migrants, we as taxpayers, people watching this program today are ultimately going to be the ones footing the bill. It doesn't matter if the Home Office can come out and say, oh, we've cut hotel costs by X amount. Those costs threaten to still be on people's council tax
bills. And we know
bills.
local councils have had a massive cut in their budgets over the years. They can barely cover things like social care, filling potholes. This is going to be a massive extra expense, and it's going to come at the expense of people already living here in Britain, in this community. I have to say, I'd like councils to spend a lot less on the nonsense they spend on, lose their diversity in HR and all that nonsense. But at the end of the day, they're not going to have the money to do it either. Again, someone's going to have to pay for it, and it's going to end up being us. Joe Ventura, from the Taxpayers Alliance, thanks so much for joining us.